Good afternoon and welcome to GAPABA's event applying to the United States Attorney's Office. GAPABA was founded in 1993. From its humble beginnings, the organization, GAPABA, has grown to include over 600 attorneys. The membership rank of GAPABA is diverse and spans the entire field of practice and law. GAPABA's Public Service Committee's goal, one of its goals, is to increase the participation of Asian American attorneys in the public service arena. In Georgia in 2020, we've had significant success. We've had 5 AAPI attorneys and lawyers appointed to the courts, headlined of course by Justice McMillan's promotion or elevation to the Georgia Supreme Court. Also in the November elections, we've had 6 elected Asian Americans to the Gold Dome. It's an improvement from when BJay was the only Asian American under the Gold Dome, but we have a long way to go. And serving as an assistant United States attorney is a great and exciting way to get involved in the public service arena. And so we couldn't be happier to welcome our guest today to tell us how we can do so. Before we get into the program, we'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsors, the Korean American Bar Association, the South Asian American Bar Association, the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, the Stonewall Bar Association, and the Vietnamese American Bar Association. I feel confident in saying that all of our sister organizations are grateful for this opportunity, and we all share in the common effort of diversifying the cadre of attorneys serving in the public service arena.
Thank you for that, Rodney. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the great work that you do for the Public Service Committee of GAPABA. My name is Angela Hsu, and I'm the president of GAPABA, and it's my pleasure to introduce BJay Pak, who really needs no introduction. He's the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District. And, one thing I will say about BJay, I think most of you probably know his background. BJay has been a longtime supporter and member of GAPABA all the way through his career. I've personally known him since he was a young associate at Alston & Bird. And I can honestly say that I've followed his career with so much interest. He's just always been a superstar. And now he's a superstar on the national stage, as well as in the great state of Georgia. The best thing I can say about BJay is that all the way through, from when he was a young associate to his lofty position today, he's always been the same guy. He's the guy who comes in, brings great confidence to everything that he does, but he also does everything he does with this kindness and understanding and empathy. He's a wonderful human being as well as a wonderful legal professional. So take it away, BJay.
Thank you, Angela, for that awesome introduction. Remind me to hire you as my PR person. Well, welcome, everybody. You're probably wondering, why are we having this seminar? And here's the reason why. During my tenure as U.S. Attorney and also my time as Assistant U.S. Attorney, I've spent close to 10 years in the federal government, particularly with this office. And we've never had a seminar like this where we kind of peel back the curtains to learn a little bit more about the process that goes into joining the office, those of you who might be thinking about offering yourself for public service, and also to kind of think and answer questions that you may have about what this office does, what it's like, who do you have to know, what do you do to get in. And so just to kind of a little plug for the U.S. Attorney's Office, in general, I want to encourage you guys to offer yourself for public service if you can. But particularly this office, we have a very storied history. A lot of the alumnus from this office have gone on to hold very prominent positions. Just to give you a little rundown, obviously we had an acting attorney general of the United States that was former AUSA, 2 deputy attorney generals, associate attorney general. The current FBI director, Chris Wray, was an AUSA in the office. A ton of federal judges at both the circuit and also the district court level. Lots of state court judges were AUSAs in this office. The first general counsel for the Department of Homeland Security was a U.S. attorney from this district. Lots of U.S. attorneys, and the current presiding justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, David Namias, was an AUSA, then U.S. attorney, and finally got that. And even the current president of University of Georgia, Jared Moorhead, was an AUSA in this office. You may not have known that. So the office has a tremendous amount of history of folks coming through the office. I think this serving in this capacity have given them perhaps a credentialing that allowed some of these opportunities to open up. Now, we want to talk to you a little bit more about, started with the people who are on the hiring committee. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Claudia. I want to introduce, you'll hear from several of these members. First, Neely Van David, who is actually the Deputy Chief of the Civil Division. She also chairs our hiring committee, and you'll hear from her in a few minutes. And of course, Michael Hertzwitz, who is the Vice Chair of the hiring committee. Mike is actually the Chief of the Cybercrime and Intellectual Property section in our office, a very, very important section. He was a former prosecutor. You'll also hear Bernita was not here today, Kelly and Trevor. If you go to the next slide, you will also hear from Tiffany Johnson. You'll hear from Tiffany Johnson, who's been in the office in both civil and criminal divisions, and she'll tell you a little bit more about the process and what went in. And we have some members that are representative of different sections in the office. It includes folks who's been on the hiring committee for a long time, and also folks who are recent hires, as recent as 2 years, that serve in that capacity. Next slide, please. You may know some of these individuals. The reason we're putting the names and faces up for you is because they're welcoming in terms of, if you have any questions after this, feel free to contact them, look over in a bar, send them an email to answer any questions you may have about the office, about the process, and as a resource. I wanted to do this because when I was an AUSA or even an associate, I really didn't have any insights into the office about what type of work, what kind of pay, and how do I kind of get in. I was very fortunate enough to meet some folks, David Namias being one of them, and his late wife, Kathy O'Neill, was another, that gave me a lot of insights about the office and encouraged me to apply. And so I'm positive that it's because of their generosity of time and information that I'm here sitting in this seat. So I want to provide that opportunity for you as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to quickly go over 4 things: who the Department of Justice and U.S. Attorney's Office we are, what we do, and of course, more importantly, what type of people are we looking for AUSA, and how to apply. Next slide, please. So who are we? So everybody probably knows that we are part of the Department of Justice, but actually, the United States Attorney's Office predates actually the creation of the Department of Justice. The first Judiciary Act created the Attorney General of the United States. It also created 6 seats in the U.S. Supreme Court. At the same time, it created 13 United States attorneys. And we are obviously a legacy of the original 13. And so we predate the Department of Justice by about 80 years. Obviously, we became a part of the Department of Justice, and that is kind of the reason why the Attorney General is also a presidentially nominated and Senate confirmed, as well as the U.S. attorneys. So we enjoy a lot of autonomy because of this history, and also we're also part of the largest law firm in the United States. Next slide, please. And as the U.S. Attorney's Office here, we work very closely with the federal law enforcement agencies. We have 4 of them that's part of the DOJ here. You're familiar with the FBI, the Marshal Service, the ATF, and DEA, but there's 1811s or federal agents who have arrest powers in every federal agency virtually that the U.S. Attorney's Office works with in investigating and prosecuting crimes. And we also handle the civil cases as well. The United States Attorney is the chief law enforcement officer with respect to, I think you may be familiar with the criminal law, but you also have to understand that we also represent the federal government in civil litigation as well, both affirmative and defensive. So if you get hit by a car, a postal service delivery truck, and then you want to sue the federal government, the U.S. Attorney come in to defend the postal service. That's a common example of defensive case. Of course, we also administer programs like Medicare and Medicaid. When there's fraud detected or fraud suspected, we are the ones to sue to recover some of the funds, the integrity of the federal programs that you probably see in the paycheck protection program, those type of programs that the federal government rolls out. The U.S. Attorney's Office is in the front lines in acting as the lawyer for the federal government and protecting the integrity of those programs. And the AUSA represents the United States on behalf of the U.S. Attorney. So I'm the U.S. Attorney. By statute, I am granted power over all litigation in the federal district here. And then AUSAs, I delegate that authority down further to the individual AUSA to handle those matters in my stead. Next slide, please. Georgia has 3 federal districts, northern, southern, and the middle district. The southern district is the oldest, obviously. The northern district was created around 1883. And then around 1920s, the middle district was carved out because of population growth. Just a little bit of history. Athens and also Columbus were part of the northern district of Georgia. Many people don't know that, but now it's part of the middle district, Georgia. Northern district comprises of about 46 counties in the north of the state of Georgia. We have approximately 6.7 million people that we serve in over 220 law enforcement agencies, fed, state, and local. Next slide, please. So what do we do? Next slide. Our office is divided into 3 general divisions, civil, criminal, and administrative. Administrative is what you think exactly what it is. It actually provides support for our AUSAs, but we'll briefly go over some of the 2 different divisions. Next slide, please. So in the criminal cases, we have a variety of statutes that we enforce, but we break them down to kind of big general categories. And this is a pie chart that you see. We are about quarter, even in 4 different areas. 1, violent offenses, carjacking, bank robberies, human trafficking, child exploitation, domestic terrorism, those type of cases of violent crime. White collar crime is anything related to money and fraud, document fraud. Drug offenses tend to be drug cartel level cases that we prosecute through sophisticated interceptions. Corruption cases and organized crime, they belong in 2 different categories here. Official corruption generally tends to be the bribery, graft type of cases that you see in the news. Organized crime could range from the mob all the way to the gangs that you see that do different types of racketeering activity. Next, please. So we have several divisions separated out. We have a lot of AUSAs. Criminal division comprises of around 90, 95 AUSAs, and the rest are the civil division. I mean, that's a little too high. I think maybe 85 AUSAs in the criminal division, and the rest are in the civil division. Civil division ranges around 19 to 21 AUSAs. And so these are the criminal division sections. We could go into more detail later offline. The civil cases, obviously, we have the affirmative type of frauds that I told you about, and of course, torts. And we are kind of like a mixture between a county attorney and the DA's office, because we have both of those powers. So you can imagine every type of litigation that a public entity would face, the U.S. Attorney's Office, we do handle those on behalf of the federal government agency in federal court, and sometimes in state court and bankruptcy court if necessary. Next slide, please. Civil division has 4 different units. You see affirmative civil enforcement, which Neely, that you hear from, is she's in charge of that division. Defensive litigation, the torts that we talked about. Civil rights, we're talking about everything from voting rights to excessive force to discrimination based on age, sex, sexual orientation, any of those protected class litigation. Religious liberty litigation, we handle all those. And financial litigation are generally our collections, both in the criminal fines and restitution, and also in the civil side of people who breach of loans and different type of programs that there's a judgment against them, and they help us collect and protect the public fisc. Next. Our current priorities are obviously some of the big things that you may read about. These change with the administration. So I suspect that with the new administration, they may have certain tweaks to the priorities, but generally we want to make sure that the public is protected. So anti-terrorism, domestic terrorism will always be on the front of any administration's priorities, reducing violent crimes, and of course, right now the opioid crisis. Other than that, there may be national priorities, but the U.S. Attorney in particular, he or she can choose additional areas of emphasis and assign AUSAs to combat or tackle those type of issues. Next priority. Next slide, please. So who are we looking for? And I'm going to turn this over to Neely and Mike, because they'll give you lots more information about this, and we could talk later to answer any questions you'll have. So our hiring chair, Neely Van David, one of our superstars, Take it away.
Thanks, BJ. Good afternoon, everybody. So every time we post an announcement, we get a number, hundreds of different applications, and most of them are top-notch or really excellent. So how do we distinguish between the various applications and candidates that we get for each of our different positions? We went ahead and we listed some of the top considerations that we take into account when we're making those decisions. Obviously, the decision's made by the U.S. Attorney, but the hiring committee is the one that has the first shot at looking at the resumes and then doing the first round interviews. And we'll go into that a little bit more later when Tiffany talks to you. So first of all, what we're looking for is individuals who have very high levels of integrity and excellent judgment. Why are these important? As an AUSA, you have a lot of autonomy and you're given a lot of discretion. So we want to make sure that the AUSAs that we hire will exercise that autonomy and exercise that discretion consistent with our goal of doing justice. Integrity, we find this is something that a candidate has or doesn't have. So when a candidate's instinct, what is their instinct when they're confronted with an ethical issue or a difficult situation? What do they tend to do? And so we ask questions that are designed to get at that. The judgment is a little bit different. That tends to be more experience-based. So how are they going to deal with a difficult issue? And what is the judgment that they're going to exercise? What kind of considerations do they take into account? That's something that comes with experience. And even if a candidate early on comes and interviews and we decide that they don't quite have it yet, that's definitely something that can be honed and developed as they get more experience. We also require very strong legal skills, reasoning, writing, and oral advocacy. And so why do we do that? Our predecessors at the U.S. Attorney's offices at U.S. Attorney's office here in Atlanta, in Northern District of Georgia, have built a really good reputation with the bench. And it's our responsibility not to squander that reputation and not to undermine the credibility that our predecessors has created for us. And so one of the ways we do that is to make sure that we practice at the very highest level. So these are characteristics that we also look for in applicants. Justice and public service, obviously, being an AUSA is not about winning, it's about getting to the right result. So we're zealous advocates for the United States, but as for the United States, its goal is to actually do justice. If that means that we get new information, which means we have to dismiss an indictment, we need to make sure that we are bringing on people who are willing to do that because they need to achieve the goal of justice. Public service, so, for those of you who are in private practice, you'll be taking a pay cut if you come to the U.S. Attorney's office. We get compensated very well, but it's not really commensurate with what you'll get working at some of the larger law firms in town, or actually some of the smaller law firms in town. So we want to make sure that when people come here, they do so for reasons other than financial motivation. They're doing it because they really care about the job. Along the same lines as our resources just are not the same as the resources that some of the large law firms have. And so that's a little frustrating at times. And again, you have to be willing to overlook those and be happy with the kind of job that we have in order to deal with those frustrations. But I have to say that everyone I know in our office has a very high job satisfaction rate. And you don't hear complaints about the fact that we make less or our resources are lower, because people are really excited to be coming to the office and doing the job that we do. And the final bullet point that we listed is teamwork and collegiality. This is really important in our office here in the Northern District of Georgia. We have a very unique culture. It's very supportive. It's very collegial. It's very family-like. And this really has come out in the last year in light of the pandemic, when we've had to rely on each other for all kinds of support. So when we interview folks, we want to make sure we're bringing in people who are going to perpetuate that kind of culture and not necessarily come in with sharp elbows and push their way, through the different cases that they get, but the people who are really going to work well with others and show respect for others who are currently working here. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is just a pie chart that's designed to show you where most of our AUSAs come from. And this is just since 2016, since the beginning of 2016. As you can see, the breakdown between the private sector and prosecutors is fairly even. And the 10% other government, that tends to be from, for example, the AG's office, who are not prosecutors, and also from other areas of the Department of Justice. So you shouldn't feel like your current employment situation should bar you from applying. We look at everybody. We bring in everybody. I will say that in the past, that's changed a little bit. It depends. It changes under each U.S. attorney. In the past, for example, we've had more people come from private sectors. And under BJay, we've brought in a lot more people from the DA's offices. But it doesn't change that much. It's pretty consistent over time. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so this kind of gives you some idea of how much experience we typically have in our new AUSAs. Average post-law school is 6.9 years. More than 10 years is still pretty high, 41%. And the reason is for the specific reasons that we mentioned before, which is in order to develop the judgment, the legal skills, the oral advocacy that we typically are looking for in candidates, we're looking for somebody who has a decent amount of experience under their belt. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Herskowitz, who's Vice Chair of the Hiring Committee, to talk more about the breakdown.
Yeah, thank you so much, Neely and BJay, and thanks so much for having me, everybody. So here's a pie chart that kind of shows the background that folks, new AUSAs, having criminal law experience. That's about 52% of the new AUSAs will come to our office with criminal law experience, whether it be from a DA's office or another U.S. Attorney's office. And about 47% will have no criminal law experience. So they may come from a law firm or from civil practice. So it's about equal, a little bit higher on the criminal side. Next slide, please. Under BJay, we have a lot more AUSAs that have come in with criminal law background. So about 70% and 29% without the criminal law background. So under BJay, more criminal law folks, AUSAs have the criminal law background. Next slide, please. So some statistics you might be interested in. Since January of 2016, so you're looking about since the last 5 years, we've hired 51 new AUSAs. And so what kind of background have those AUSAs had? Well, here's some interesting statistics. Top 14 law school, 41%. Honors, 53%, graduating with honors. In the top 15% of their class, we have 25%. Have you been on a journal? 53%. Of course, we look at that. There's definitely a substantial amount of legal writing. So we look at that as well, 53%. 51% have had some sort of federal clerkship. And that is, it doesn't have to come straight from a clerkship, a federal clerkship, but some federal clerkship in your employment history. And then any type of clerkship, it could be a state clerkship as well, 63%. So those are some interesting statistics there. Next slide, please. You may ask, there's certain law schools we look at. Well, we have AUSAs, a very diverse group of AUSAs from all over the country. Certainly we get a large number of AUSAs that come in from, can we go back, please? From our local law schools here in Georgia, Georgia State, Emory, Mercer, of course, University of Georgia. So we do have AUSAs, of course, that are coming from law schools here. Next slide, please. But we have law schools all over the country. We have Harvard, Virginia, Michigan, we have Syracuse, we have University of Texas, NYU, Berkeley. So I think you'd find in our office really diverse group of candidates from all over. And I could go on. Howard University, Vanderbilt, University of North Carolina, Memphis, Kansas, Florida, and Wake Forest. So really a diverse group of schools represented here at the office. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over how to apply. I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Tiffany.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. If we can go to the next slide, and let's talk about the hiring process. It's the nuts and bolts. That's why we're all here today, right? So the process starts with an announcement, and those are posted on our website, which will be on the next slide, but let's not go there yet. The announcement, the most important thing to do with the announcement is to read it. We find applicants who don't realize that they're applying for, let's say, a very specific division or a certain subject matter area. So there's a lot of really important information in the announcement, including how long it's open. Usually it's only open for maybe a week or 2 weeks. And what kind of position it is. Is it a full-time position or is it a term position, which usually only lasts for about 14 months? So really pay attention to the content of the announcement, and that'll give you some clue as to the kinds of questions we might be asking you during the interview process. The next thing that happens is you read the announcement and you decide, you know what, this is the one that I want to apply for. So you're going to submit your resume, your cover letter, a list of references, and a writing sample to our office. You're going to send that to Denise Baker, and we have a special website or a special email address set up specifically for you to submit that information. And you know, one question we get occasionally is who should we list as our references? Well, you want to list professional references, and one of the things that we really look for is or recommend is that you list a current supervisor. So to the extent you can have someone from your current office on that list, that's helpful. So we go through all of those materials as a committee, and we select a certain number of people for a first round interview. Now that first round interview is going to be with members of the hiring committee, those 3 slides that BJ showed at the beginning. And it's really based on who's available. So if you're coming on a slow day, you might get all 11 of us on a panel. If it's a very busy day, you might get 3 or 4 of us. And those interviews are usually 30 to 45 minutes. And you can expect questions specifically about your employment experience, your legal experience. One thing that I recommend to anyone that is asking me about what to expect during an interview is be prepared to talk about specifics and specific examples of the kind of work you've done. And that really requires you to go back through your written work product, go back through your history and think about how many hearings you've had, how many trials you've had, how many motions for summary judgment you've prepared, and what were they about. We will ask you why you want to come to our office, and not just why you want to be an AUSA, but specifically why you want to come to be an AUSA in the Northern District of Georgia, because like Neely mentioned, collegiality and teamwork are very important to us, and we want to know that you actually want to come to our office and not just end up in DOJ somewhere. And then the dreaded hypothetical question. We will ask you at least one hypothetical question, if not more. But those are designed not to get at a right answer, but to see how you think as an attorney. And with the pandemic, you can expect I would anticipate that if you're interviewing in the next 6 months, your interview is probably going to be over Zoom or WebEx. So be prepared to deal with some technical glitches or not being able to see people and trying to get your personality across during that interview, which can be very difficult during a Zoom meeting. I think we got a question asking, what makes for a good interviewee? And I would say, and Neely and Mike can chime in later, but I would say one of the most important things is that you show us who you are. We want to know what kind of person you are, how you think, what kind of lawyer you are, but also do we want to, go out and grab coffee with you because of that collegiality that Neely mentioned. The second most important thing is being prepared. Again, make sure you go back and you really think critically about the kind of work you've done and how it can apply to either being a civil AUSA, being a civil litigator, or coming in and being a prosecutor and representing the United States. So after you get through that process, the committee will then go back and submit their feedback to the U.S. Attorney, and he will make a decision about who to bring back for a second round interview. And once that decision is made, the hiring committee will go back and look at the writing sample that you provided, conduct the reference check. So we will actually pick up the phone and call the references that you provided. No worries, we'll let you know that we're going to do that before we do it. And there will also be a blind writing exercise. And what that consists of is you'll get a link to a writing exercise. You'll have 72 hours to plow through the information that's provided. I believe it's kind of like a write-on exercise for a journal in law school, where they give you all the cases, they give you the problem, and they tell you to write up your answer. So once you go through that process, then all of that information will be presented to the U.S. Attorney, to the first assistant, and to the various chiefs. Usually you'll have a couple of chiefs and deputy chiefs sitting in, depending on which division, whether it's the civil or the criminal division that you're applying for. And you'll have a second round interview. And I've only been in my second round interview. So I can't say how different they are now than when they were a couple years ago when I was applying. But that second round interview is just as fun as the first one. So, and they might ask you about some of your answers that you provided in your first round interview. So again, always be prepared. And if you get through the second round and the U.S. Attorney decides that he wants to extend you an offer, I think we got a question about the timing. So all of this takes about a couple months from the time that you apply to you getting an offer. Takes several weeks. And then once you get an offer, there is a background check that you have to go through that itself takes several weeks. So the whole process from announcement to offer takes about 3 months. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the website I mentioned in the beginning. We place our vacancies on this website. If you click on careers, on the careers tab, and then click on attorneys, that will take you to the listing of vacancies. So, always sort of put this in your list of favorites if you're interested in coming to the office, and, check it once a week because we're constantly updating it. Next slide. And if you were not interested in what I had to say in the last 10 minutes, it's all right here in the interviewing with the U.S. Attorney's Office guide. We wanted to make sure that the process is open and that people know what to expect during their interview. So a lot of what I've said, minus my grand advice about what to do, is in this particular document. And that's on that same under the attorneys tab. And we can go to the next slide, which I think is for BJay.
All right, let's talk about money. This is a big question that many people want to know because, everybody has student loans, and I get it. I had them too. I was very fortunate because I went to law school when it didn't cost a house to actually go. So I was able to pay off my loans if I went. But you may see this. The U.S. Attorney's offices are under a administrative determined pay plan, not the GS scale. You can't look at the GS scale. And so what you see here is kind of the 80 grades. You see that? That is actually, it corresponds with how many years that you've been out of legal experience you have since graduating from law school. So you don't have to necessarily pass the bar, but if you had started a legal job after graduation, that starts counting. And so depending on the number of years you have, you go up the 80 grade side. And then you have this thing that tells you kind of the recruiting ranges, right? So that just tells you, we'll use an example. You're not going to be hired into actually 80-30. That's pretty senior if you think about it. But let's use just as an example, 80-31. So he has a range of 111,000 all the way up to 153,000. So that is actually the range that the U.S. attorney, when you're hired in, could put you at with respect to your pay. Now, generally we talk about base pay, and then there is a cost of living percentage that you get above that. So it could be higher than what your base pay is. So we generally talk in terms of what the total amount of money that we'll be paying you. But the higher you are, and if you are successful in getting another year's experience, you are actually moving up the grades, AD. And so there is a discretionary component, for example, for when you get recruited in, and also when you're getting your pay raises each year. And so that's really kind of similar to a meritorious and not lockstep type of model that those of you who are in law firms are used to. And so in our office, what we generally try to do is match you, bring you in at a level where the pay is equal to someone who has the exact same amount of experience that you have, to base pay. And then once that person is in the office and perform well, they may get additional increases for merit. So there is a little bit of a spread, even though let's say both of you are graduated, 10 years out of law school and joined the office, but the other person has been in the office a few years longer and shown performance. The base pay will be the same, but they may get actually a higher salary than you. So the maximum amount of pay that you get is $170,664, and that's by statute. And so that will tell you exactly how much money I make, because that's actually $500 less than exactly money that I made, because that's by statute. And our pay is, tied to congressional pay, and there's politics involved in that. But you could actually, I have a lot of folks who have been in the office for a while actually make more money than I do because they are eligible for bonuses, and we reward bonuses, so they make more. So understand that 170 is the maximum. You probably won't be brought in at that level, but it's determined by the AD grade. So you want to look up the AD grade and the number of years you've been out, and then kind of know which range that you are. So you could talk to the U.S. attorneys about kind of what salary you would like to bring in. And there's some wiggle room there. There's some folks who had a lot of experience who joined us that needed a little bit more amount to kind of make the cash flow. And there was some room in the budget for that, and this person was worth it. So there was some negotiation there, but don't expect big swings like you see in private sector, because the budget process just won't allow to do that. And it would be unusual for us to make exceptions, and you would really have to be like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that's the pay. There's a lot of complicating factors regarding that, but I wanted to explain to you the basics and which scale that we use. And we certainly answer questions offline, particularly about how much money. I know you have to do your monthly budget, and I know a lot of folks who want to join the office that will currently have either golden handcuffs or they can't join right now because of some other obligations. But I wanted to let you know that what range you may be getting if you join the office at a certain time. Next slide, please. So this is the important portion. There's a lot of questions that came in. I try to answer some, but we received some questions, and I think that Neely, Michael, and Tiffany could certainly answer those questions for you. Why don't we start with some of the questions that we received through email previously. Starting, Mike, who wants to do the questions with respect to people who are international students, or Rodney, are you going to read those questions?
Sure. Thank you, BJ. We can start with that question. We have, GAPABA has a lot of members who are students, who are LLM students from foreign countries, who are here with student visas and legally allowed to work, but may not be citizens. Are they allowed or able to apply for a position with the United States Attorney's Office?
So one of the requirements is that you have to be a U.S. citizen to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office. However, there are some folks who have dual citizenship, and we actually have a fair number in our office, and that's fine. You have to submit some additional paperwork, but dual citizenship is fine, but you do have, one of those citizenships has to be with the United States.
Another question we have, and we'll start sort of from the very beginning. If you're currently in law school, what can you do to best position yourself to become an AUSA?
Certainly you want to try to get the types of experience kind of going forward that would make you a successful candidate. Certainly there's different paths, very diverse paths that folks have taken in this office. But that's what really makes our office great. So we have folks that are coming, straight from the DA's office or straight from a firm. With me, I started off at a law firm and did that for about 6-7 years and moved over to the DA's office. So I had the writing experience from the law firm and also the stand-up experience from the DA's office. So it doesn't, there's really no set path, but you want to try to get that, if you can, stand-up experience and get that writing, get that analysis experience, which you could get through a law firm as well. So I know kind of a related question, maybe a good point to segue to that, Rodney, is, are we just synonymous with getting folks from big law firms? And the answer is no. Certainly we have some great AUSAs that have come from big law firms, and we've hired from big law firms, but we also have some really talented folks that have come from mid-sized law firms, from small law firms, from DA's offices. So it's really the experience that you get. And some word of advice for folks that are in big firms that may not get all the stand-up experience there. You really want to seek out those opportunities. If you're at a firm where you may not get as many depositions or stand-up experience, you really want to be on the lookout for those opportunities to be able to take a deposition, to be able to stand up in court. And if you can't get that at the law firm, take a pro bono case. Do everything you can to try to get experience which would benefit you coming over as an AUSA.
Rodney, if I could add to that, right now the most junior person who joined the office has 3 years experience, and so usually they look for someone in the 4 years or more. The other way to get into the office, and this is probably department-wide and not just my office, is there's this program called the DOJ Honors Program. So if you're in law school right now, you could get selected for the DOJ Honors Program, which they will hire you straight out of a law school or out of a clerkship. And that is another way you could get into the department. We've never done it in the past. When I came on, I said I'm open to hiring DOJ honors students, but we have not received any applications directly yet. So we're open now. Then again, the next administration, whoever the U.S. attorney will be after me, may change that. Well, I know exactly who that person is going to be. It's going to be Kurt Erskine, my first assistant, is going to be after me for a while. But the next presidentially appointed one may change that. But historically, regardless of who the administration kind of appoints to this post, our office has been pretty consistent in the factors that we're looking for that Neely and Mike have described, and Tiffany have described for you. And the timing of it doesn't really change. The only thing that really impacts when they hire is generally budgetary. And we'll explain that in a second.
And I think, Neely, you addressed this earlier, but and I think BJay hinted to it as well, but do you anticipate what you look for in candidates changing with BJay's replacement or even with the new U.S. attorney?
So as BJay said, we've been pretty consistent over time. I've been on the hiring committee, I think, since 2011, 12. And it's been pretty consistent in terms of what we look for: integrity, skills, that kind of thing. But every U.S. attorney has their own tweak, own little thing that they look for in particular. And BJay was like that as well. And so it does have an effect on how we screen the candidates and what we look for.
Another question we have is regarding residency. We have questions from people who are out of state wanting to apply or move to Atlanta and wanting to apply to your office. And we also have people who are not in the Northern District of Georgia. How important is residency in the district to someone's application or candidacy?
I was going to say that's one of the things that, one of the things that BJay wanted us to look at is somebody who had a commitment to our jurisdiction. But Mike, go ahead and talk about how we look at that factor.
Yeah, so I think, so certainly it's important that, folks or applicants have some ties to the jurisdiction. It's something that we look at, but, certainly it's not a hard and fast rule. I could think of a couple of AUSAs offhand that are tremendous AUSAs that came here with, no ties to the jurisdiction. But we certainly want folks that, if they don't have ties to the jurisdiction, that, want to come here and want to serve the people of this district. And one way we look at that is looking at your cover letter. And, sometimes we'll see folks or applicants without ties to the district that really set forth in their cover letter the reasons why they want to come here. Either they have family here, or, Atlanta is really a dynamic place, and these are the reasons why they want to come work at our office. One thing I would not recommend is, of course, we have applicants applying to many different offices, but sometimes you'll see a cover letter and you'll just know that that same cover letter was just fired off to 10 different offices. And the only thing different about that letter is Northern District of Georgia is plugged in, and that doesn't really tell the committee why you want to be here. So, to circle back, it's certainly not a hard and fast rule. It's something important that we look at, applicants with ties to the jurisdiction, but, we want the best candidates. So certainly if you want to be here, we encourage you to apply.
The next question, does it hurt if a candidate has applied multiple times in the past? And related to that, if you interviewed or you're applying again, is your application looked differently, or when you apply the second time or after you've interviewed the first time?
So we have a lot of people who applied many times. Tiffany, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think the only thing that's different is that the committee has seen your resume before. And a lot of people are familiar with your interview. The biggest thing for me with somebody who's applying for a second time is what has changed since the first time, especially if we interviewed you the first time. If we didn't interview the first time, then we don't know much more about you. And so, there would be no reason for us to view you differently because you're in the stack for a second time. But if we have interviewed you, one thing that I'm always surprised by is that people who have been through the interview process once, when they resubmit their application, they don't change their cover letter. They don't even acknowledge that they've seen the committee before. And the first thing that I'm looking for, and maybe the first question I ask is, what has changed about your experience or about your commitment to public service? Have you taken on more pro bono matters? Have you had a trial? Have you moved to Atlanta? Have you taken the Georgia bar? Those are all things that, that can change, that might, change the way the committee views you as an applicant. So, if I had one word of advice, if you have gotten an interview once, or if you've applied multiple times and not gotten an interview, it's worth it to address that head on, and, include some information in your cover letter about, the experiences you've had since the first time you applied.
And Rodney, a fair number of people in our office have applied multiple times before actually being selected. So people should not be disheartened if they, me too. So you should definitely keep trying.
Related to that, we have a question regarding the size of the resume. One questioner said that they saw in a recent announcement that there was a preference for a one-page resume. Does that preference still exist?
I think that you should be able to put, oh, go ahead. I think you should be able to put everything on one page. We've received resumes that are 5 or 6 pages long, and I don't think that it adds anything. You should be able to summarize your key experience and what you've been doing in one page. I don't know, if you really feel like you need an extra page, fine, but don't submit a 5 or 6 page resume. It doesn't really add anything.
That's an opportunity to actually be strategic about the information you include in your cover letter, because we do read the cover letters. So if there's some experience that you don't include on your resume, maybe because it's non-legal experience or it's something interesting that you just didn't have room for at the bottom of the resume, include that in your cover letter and tell us why you think that experience is important to who you are as an applicant.
And one of the reasons why someone might have a long resume is because they've had a lot of jobs, a lot of different positions. And that is also something that you should address in your cover letter. Just think about what it might look like if you had 8 jobs in 8 years. you know, the people, you know, we're going to wonder, like, why is that person, why don't they stay at the job that they have? Why are they moving around so long? Another way to strategically use your cover letter is to address things like that. Also, gaps in your resume. If you had a gap because maybe you were taking care of a sick mother or something, make sure that you address that in the cover letter as well, so that we don't make incorrect assumptions based on your resume.
Speaking of resumes, is your office open to someone with 20 years of experience or more, someone who's worked a very long time?
Mike, do you want to take that?
Yeah, no, of course. You know, there's no hard and fast rule. You know, if you have the judgment, if you have the integrity, if you have the experience, we encourage you to go ahead and apply, and definitely set forth in your cover letter, kind of you know, summarize that experience and tell us, you know, why you'd be a great addition to our office. So, you know, if you have experience, you know, we're not going to say don't apply over 15 or 20 years or 5 years. You know, we encourage you to, if you're interested, go ahead and apply.
And in terms of sort of getting
Ronnie, if I add one more thing to that, I actually hired somebody that had 21 years experience before joining our office. The other thing is, you have to kind of think about it this way. It really depends on your experience. If you're applying for a criminal AUSA slot, but you have 0 criminal experience, you know, and you've been out 20 somewhat years, remember that pay scale I just told you about? You're going to be at the top of the scale versus someone who has, you know, 1 or 2 years of criminal experience. That's, you know, a little bit more junior in terms of experience, less than 10 years. All things being equal, I think experience-wise, the junior person is probably better off because I'm getting more for the money, right, than someone who's maxing out with bringing 0 experience to that we have to train anyhow. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to ban them like that, but I'm saying all things being equal, if that person is a very experienced prosecutor, just like the 21-year experience at USA we hired was excellent, had tremendous amount of experience and expertise in a particular area that we needed, it really made sense, and that person was a very fantastic candidate.
In terms of getting experience and getting into the office, I have 2 related questions. One, do you have an internship program for law students? A, and B, suppose you don't have the requisite experience, but you really want to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Is there sort of a role for someone like that where they can build their experience within the U.S. Attorney's Office and sort of show what they can do practicing with you in your office?
We do have an internship program. We really encourage people to join and participate in the program. We take interns over the summer from schools all over the country. Obviously, during the winter, the fall internship program is from local schools for obvious reasons. And we have a lot of people who apply after they graduate from law school. They go work for a few years in the private sector or DA's office and then come back. And it really helps because we now have somebody we can talk to and say, how did this person do when they were an intern? So we strongly recommend that you participate in our intern program. And we work really hard to make it a significant and a meaningful experience. We don't just give work, we make sure people get into court, and we take them to visit the prison and the courts, and there are all kinds of fun things that they do when they come. But in terms of, Mike, I'll turn it over to you in terms of what other opportunities there are to get on the ground experience with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, we have thank you, Neely. We have the summer internship. You know, if you finish your first year, going in your second year, you're basically here all summer, and that's when you have research writing projects, you go to court, you know, we did field trips to prisons and the agencies as well. And we also have for the 3 Ls, the Certified Legal Intern Program, where actually the interns are certified to appear in court under the supervision of an AUSA. And actually, a couple of years ago, there was a 3L from Emory who actually tried a case with me. And she did a fabulous job, and she was certified to do that. And so we highly encourage, you know, both do the summer internship, and then when you're certified through the different law schools programs, if your law school has that program, to come here, and we certainly make every opportunity to get you stand-up experience as well. The second part of the question is really no kind of journeyman program kind of with the United States Attorney's Office. We are kind of learning kind of once you've graduated from law school. So our recommendation is, you know, once you've graduated, go get that experience, whether it be at a firm, DA's office, and kind of get that type of experience, and then come back and apply when you're, a number, 3 to 5, 4 years come out and have that experience, then go ahead and apply.
A related question, Michael. Is the office planning on increasing the number of full-year externships for 3Ls? Do you know?
I don't. Does Tiffany Neely, BJay? Yeah.
So the contact in our office with regard to the externship is Bernita Malloy and Sarah Clapman. They're both the people who handle the internships. I think they actually call them externships. And so those would be the people who would know the answer. Yeah. But definitely go ahead and submit your application.
And they're on the hiring committee, correct? I know
one of them is. Bernita is, but not Sarah. Sarah's not.
But for the viewers, you can look them up at BJ's instructions. You can look them up at the State Bar website. And I think BJay gave everyone authorization to reach out to at least Bernita with questions, right? Right, BJay? So
absolutely. Bernita's lovely. You'll enjoy speaking to her. Trust me.
Yes, indeed. So you can reach out to, you can get their email addresses from the State Bar and reach out to Bernita with specific questions about the 3L internship program.
Now, Rodney, let me just say there is a process for applying. So go talk to your career person at your law school, and they will actually tell you what the process is for applying. And that's probably the best way to get in the queue. And then it's a similar process to hiring on as an AUSA. You have to be interviewed, you submit a resume, and so on.
Okay. And by the way, BJay, I'm sort of a little biased in saying this. Thank you for increasing the number of former prosecutors and ADAs. But one of the questions we have is, what specific experiences or qualities you look for in former ADAs, assistant district attorneys, that you are interviewing or hiring?
Tiffany, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So you're asking about ADAs, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So obviously, you guys being prosecutors is helpful if you're applying for a prosecutor position in our office, because you're getting those reps in court. But, one of the big differences between being a county prosecutor and being a federal prosecutor is that a lot of what we do is on paper. So we do a lot of writing and a lot of persuasive writing at that, not just the pro forma submissions to the court. So we look for ADAs who have, even if you're in a county that doesn't take a lot of writing submissions, those ADAs who seek out those writing opportunities, let's say, in responding to a motion to suppress, you actually prepare a brief and submit it to the court, even though you don't necessarily have to. Or you reach out to your appellate folks and you say, hey, I'd like to help with this specific appeal so that I can get my writing reps. So that's the kind of thing we look for. And again, I think more important than writing, more important than, how many cases you prosecuted, is that demonstration of integrity. And good judgment. And we have ways of sort of weeding that out during the interview. But, just remembering that, our goal is not to win a case. It's not to, get our numbers up. It's to do justice. And sometimes that means having to decline a case. Sometimes that means having to reveal information to the other side that, is not good for our case. That's most important, whether you're an ADA or in private practice, just a demonstration that when you go out there and you say your name and you represent the United States of America, that we can trust that you will do justice.
We are running low on time, I think, and I think we've covered many of the questions that were asked. And I think you also did so in the PowerPoint, talking about what qualities you look for, and so on. And before I turn it over to Timothy, I just want to also thank you, Tiffany, Neely, Michael, and of course, BJay, for your time and for doing this and for a very informative session.
Thanks, Rodney. And yeah, I want to echo that. BJ, Neely, Mike, Tiffany, thanks so much for spending some time with us today and for giving us an inside look at what it's like to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I learned a ton. I'm sure our participants did as well. And just Tiffany, one thing you said sticks in my mind about we have ways of weeding out integrity during the interview. I just imagine like a stack of cash like under the seat, and you want to see like who takes that and who doesn't, who reports it. One day I'll find out from BJ what the tricks are. But I also want to take this opportunity to thank our co-sponsors for joining forces with us and hosting this event. And a special thank you to GAPABA's just terrific, talented, wonderful volunteers. In particular, I wanted to thank Bonnie Yoon, Pratyusha Chenji, Claudia Shaflok-Su, who have been instrumental in putting this together, and also been instrumental in putting together our other events in this most challenging of years. And speaking of other events, it's really hard to believe that this is our 33rd event of the year of 2020. And last one, kind of thankfully for us. Congratulations, everyone, for almost making it through the year. I, for one, am very filled with optimism for 2021, and I can't wait to see all of you in person, not just virtually and not on Zoom, but in person in just a few short months. In the meantime, please stay healthy and stay safe and have a terrific holiday season. Thank you so much for joining us.